All right, welcome back. Today, we are putting away the treaties and the diplomacy. We're talking concrete, steel, and armed guards. We're getting right into the raw mechanics of stopping a catastrophic event literally dead in its tracks. Let's dive straight into Chapter 8, The Fortress, focusing entirely on physical protection and sabotage robustness. This is the most high-stakes, boots-on-the-ground part of the curriculum.
So, what happens when the threat is already at the gates? We're skipping the policy paperwork today to look at the cinematic reality of a physical attack on a nuclear facility. Because, well, here's the harsh truth. All the international agreements and handshake diplomacy in the world won't help you if a highly coordinated, hostile force is literally breaching your perimeter fence on a random Tuesday. Physical protection is what actually stops a rogue cell from creating an immediate disaster. We have to analyze exactly how a facility stands up to a direct kinetic assault.
When we talk about physical protection, we're usually guarding against two things, right? Theft and sabotage. Theft is someone trying to steal nuclear material to build a weapon later. But sabotage? Sabotage is the ultimate nightmare scenario. The adversary's goal isn't just to steal. It's to unleash maximum devastation right then and there by deliberately causing a massive radiological release. What's terrifying and kind of surprising when you first think about it is that in a sabotage scenario, the attackers don't even need to smuggle a bomb inside. They turn the facility itself into the weapon.
Now, to understand how to defend against that, we first have to put ourselves in the shoes of the attacker. What is the adversary's target? They are hunting for very specific, critical components. They aren't just running in blindly, shooting at random pipes. They're looking for what security analysts call vital equipment sets. Think of the facility like a human body. The attackers aren't aiming for the limbs, they're going straight for the heart or the central nervous system. These are the specific life-sustaining components. We're talking cooling pumps, control systems, backup generators. If those are disabled simultaneously, that directly leads to a reactor meltdown or a massive radiation leak.
Let's look at the sequence. It's a terrifying 4 steps an adversary must successfully complete to actually cause that disaster. First, they have to physically penetrate the outer perimeter fence. Second, they have to bypass internal access controls and advanced sensors. Third, they have to locate and disable those vital equipment sets we just talked about. And finally, they trigger the radiological release. Once they cross that perimeter, a high-stakes clock starts ticking. It becomes a dead sprint, a literal race between the attackers trying to complete this sequence and the facility's security forces fighting to intercept them before that trigger is pulled.
Now, what's really fascinating about defending against this sequence is how security experts use cold, hard math to calculate a facility's survival, the clinical math of defense, specifically robustness measures. You might think nuclear security is just about building a 20-foot-thick concrete wall and hoping for the best, right? But it's actually a highly calculated clinical evaluation. It's a strict assessment of the facility's entire defensive system mapped against a defined threat.
This equation right here is the absolute heart of the matter. We're constantly weighing the probability of adversary success, or pass, against the consequences, represented by C. And look, this isn't standard risk management where you just accept a little loss here and there as the cost of doing business, because the consequences of a total radiological release are practically infinite in terms of human and environmental cost. The math demands an extreme response. There's literally zero acceptable margin of error. Our physical protection systems must drive that probability of adversary success down to absolute, unquestionable zero.
So how do we force that probability down to zero? We rely on impenetrable, layered physical barriers and sensors. Think of it like a modern medieval castle. You don't just have one big door. You have a moat, an outer wall, an inner courtyard, a reinforced keep, and guards at every bottleneck. This is what we call defense in depth. If an adversary penetrates the first layer, they aren't inside. They immediately hit a second, completely different type of barrier. Maybe the first was a physical fence, and the second is a biometric lock, all while silent alarms are directing a heavily armed response right to them. The goal of all these layers isn't necessarily to be completely unbreakable, it's to make the attacker bleed time.
But to build those layered defenses, facilities first need to know exactly who they are fighting. Enter the Design Basis Threat, or DBT. This is the defined, ultimate, hypothetical adversary profile that a facility must be built to defeat. Essentially, it's the ultimate boss-level enemy, completely customized for that specific facility and its geographic location. And this isn't just guesswork, folks. A DBT is built on real-world intelligence, geopolitical analysis, and historical data to ensure they aren't preparing for a sci-fi alien invasion but a highly plausible, intensely dangerous threat.
Are we defending against 3 guys with wire cutters or a heavily armed coordinated paramilitary team with insider help?
The official definition states it's a threat description consisting of adversary strategy, objectives, and capabilities. By outlining exactly what the enemy can do, the defenders know exactly what kind of shield they need to forge. This precisely models the adversary's strategy, their ultimate goals, and their physical and technical capabilities. I mean, an adversary looking to quietly disable a cooling pump via a sophisticated cyber attack requires a completely different defensive posture than a kinetic force trying to blow open a steel vault door with explosives. You simply cannot design a secure system to defeat an enemy you haven't thoroughly defined. The DBG gives the engineers and the security forces their concrete baseline.
Which brings us to the shield itself, Physical Protection Resources, or PPR. Knowing the math of the adversary's success probability and having a perfectly defined threat model, all of that means absolutely nothing if you don't have the actual physical assets on the ground to stop them. This right here is where theory meets reality. We're talking about deploying the arsenal, real-world resources to build our fortress. This includes armed security forces, the personnel who carry weapons and are rigorously trained to engage and neutralize the threat. It includes rigid access control barriers that physically slow down the attackers, and it includes advanced sensor networks that completely remove the element of surprise. And you guys, the technology here is wild. Modern sensors don't just see a blur of movement, they can measure the exact weight of footsteps on perimeter gravel, or detect microscopic thermal shifts in a corridor in fractions of a second. It's incredible.
Of course, calculating the cost is absolutely crucial. Because these resources aren't infinite, we have to strictly calculate the staffing and funding required to sustain this massive physical protection over time. Security at this level is incredibly expensive. You're constantly upgrading sensors to outpace new adversary tech, you're running massive training exercises. But honestly, the human element is probably the hardest part. Maintaining a highly trained 24/7 armed response force that never gets complacent, even though they might go their entire careers without seeing a real attack, is one of the most difficult and expensive challenges in nuclear security. A facility's robustness is directly tied to its willingness to aggressively fund these specialized staffing and security resources.
So as the adversary's capabilities evolve, how must our fortresses adapt to continuously prevent the unthinkable? As commercial drones get cheaper, as cyber-physical attacks become more sophisticated, the gates of the fortress are constantly being tested in completely new ways. The design basis threat is never static, and when the threat changes, the fortress has to adapt. So I'll leave you with this thought to ponder as this high-stakes game of nuclear security continues to evolve every single day. The question isn't just whether our fortresses can withstand today's design basis threat, it's whether we can afford to out-imagine tomorrow's. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep thinking critically about these systems, and I'll see you next time.